those of you watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it if you can. And for those of you listening on Spotify, Apple, or any other podcasting platform, please follow and give us a 5-star review. It definitely helps with the algorithm getting our podcast in front of more listeners. So let's get into it then. We'll start with the Man United Tottenham game. Obviously, that's the last game of the official weekend, I guess, with a Monday night game today as well. Later kickoff against Tottenham, with Tottenham coming to Old Trafford. Obviously, they're not in a great run of form either. And it ends in a 3-0 loss for Man United. The goal scorers, I believe, Brennan Johnson with one, Kulusevski with another, and Solanke with the last. And Man United having a man sent off in the 42nd minute at 1-0 down. Bruno Fernandes gets a straight red for probably what many might call a controversial challenge. So we'll start just there, right? Before we get into the performance, let's just start straight on the Bruno sending off. Do you think he deserved a sending off for that?
Gosh, I was so angry I almost coughed. Yeah, man. Honestly speaking, I think it's a disgraceful decision. If I'm real, I don't think it should have been a red card. And I've watched it back. From all the angles. I've listened to the pundits. I've listened to the content creators, and yeah, it's an infuriating one, and I understand totally where you guys as Arsenal fans have been over the last couple of weeks, because I just think it's a shocking decision, and what makes me even more infuriating is listening to people justify it and say, "Oh, we need to start giving red cards for intent now, and it doesn't really matter if he makes contact." I've got to be honest, people are letting their bias and letting their personal vendettas against certain players and teams come in the way of what is the right decision or not. And the same way I was not hammering Declan Rice or Trossard in the last couple of weeks for what some people were saying was the letter of the law and all this rubbish, I'm not going to hammer Bruno. He received an absolutely shocking decision to be sent off in that game, and there's no world that I want to be in with football where a challenge like that is given a red card. And the reasons why, number one, you have to add context in there before you even get to the challenge and understand that he slips. So when he slips, maybe a certain element of the challenge is different than he intended. So that pretty much automatically smashes this whole intention rubbish that people are saying, where he's tried to do him or hit him on the knee or whatever, because he slips already. So when you're slipping, what you're intending to do changes massively already. So I think that is a huge part to play in consideration for what you think should be given on the back of this challenge. And number two, he barely makes contact and is no studs. Like, the whole thing that would probably get you a red card in the first place is a studs up challenge where you barely make contact, or you make contact with someone with your studs open onto a person's leg or knee or whatever, right? Which I think Garnacho, was it the Stevens challenge on Garnacho's one was given a red card because he goes studs out intending to make contact with Garnacho on his knee. But even then, I agree with you. I thought that was very harsh. But whatever, people gonna do the letter of the law thing. With this Bruno one, he doesn't even hit him with his studs. His studs are not up to try and hit him on his knee or anything like that. He literally sticks his foot out to clearly do a cynical block challenge. That is the intention. The slip makes it kind of not actually have as much of an impact, I think, as Bruno wants. But somehow still Maddison rolls over and does what he needs to do, right? Because he's felt minor contact. But yeah, I think intention wise, you can't give it as a red. And then for the actual mechanics of the challenge, you can't give it as a red. And I agree with Bruno post match where he says, it should never be a red. And also, people are also, not only Chris Kavanagh is absolutely as a referee, but his get out of jail card, which is the VAR, which we've had in all of these seasons, which are supposed to correct terrible decisions, just goes with the field of play. And I hate that, because I understand the logic behind they wanting to give referees more more kind of ownership and more kind of, space to make decisions and not re-referee every decision. But this is the quintessential example of when the referee hasn't seen it properly, or has seen like something else, instead of the actual challenge and what's really happened, and is maybe reacting to things like Gary Neville saying, which I hate this excuse, the player's reaction always tells you what it was. No, mate. The player's reaction is always going to be to try and maximize the result in their favor. The same way when you see players like appeal for penalties or appeal for corners or appeal for whatever, right? That's not a barometer to use to measure whether or not something should be a red card or a foul or anything like that. That's absolutely rubbish. And it's probably the worst bit of analysis I've heard on that decision come from anyone, and it's coming from the ex-United player. So that stinks. It just should not be a red card. And I think the referee should be saved and helped by VAR, and they should look at it and say, look, Chris, I think you maybe have reacted to what the players have reacted to, and you maybe have seen it in the wrong light. And I understand why, because Bruno goes out with his leg out. But when you look at those actual other angles and you watch it back again, clearly just focused on the challenge, it's never a red. I don't know what you think, Johnson, but I think it's never a red.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, and I think I said it at the time, and I continue to say it after seeing all the replays. I don't think it was a red card. I think it was stupid. And I'm not going to do the whole letter of the law stuff and everything that people were doing to me about, oh, Rice knows he's given the ref no choice, blah blah blah. No, I think Fernandez gave the ref a choice. I don't think it was. We saw some shocking challenges even earlier in the day with Ipswich against Aston Villa that didn't, essentially went unpunished and had Unai Emery absolutely steaming by the end of that game. And I think that this one was softer than pretty much all of the ones that were not given in that game. So from my point of view, I think it's a yellow card. I think it's a cynical challenge. It's the same thing as basically pulling someone's shirt as they're getting away from you, right? Like he slipped over. He knows that Maddison's going to go past him, and he doesn't have the balance to try and grab him, because really that's what he'd probably do with his hands, is try and grab him, or just nick his trailing leg or something like that and try and get him to go down. And so for that reason, I think it would have been a yellow card. And I agree with you. I think the VAR or the lack of VAR intervention is really confusing me at this point, because it would appear that we're trying to give the on-field referee more control. But the problem is, I can't see any rhyme or reason for when we do intervene versus when we don't intervene. And this is what really bothers me, right? Like if there was a clear reason, okay, like for all of these situations, we're going to intervene. For all of those ones, we are going to leave it to the referee. Then that would be fine. But it just seems like willy-nilly, oh, Morgan Gibbs-White, I'm going to intervene with you, even though the referee's been very defiant to say that he got the ball and literally does the hand signal of getting the ball. Nope. In comes Anthony Taylor, fourth official, VAR gets involved, and he gets sent off, along with both of the managers of that game. Then you look at this, then you look at like the Trossard stuff, the Declan Rice stuff, like, why isn't VAR getting more involved in this and saying, hey, this is a pretty crucial moment of the game and you've made a pretty significant decision here. This can affect the game. Let's really check it and make sure that we're serious about it. And this is what I think football fans are okay with, right? Is like, we don't want you to slow the game down. We don't want you to send everything to the monitor. We don't want you to like slow all of the things down. But when it's at least a significant moment, like if it's a goal, or if it's a red card offence, or if it's anything else like that, I think football fans are fine if you slow the game down so that the referee can actually make the right decision, as long as he makes the right decision according to the rule book. And that's what I'm not getting here. It's like they willy-nilly choose when they want to do it or not, and they willy-nilly choose how long they want to look at things. I think there should be a mandatory, you have to look at this for 30 seconds. If you think it's significant enough, you've got to go and look at it for 30 seconds, show it on the big screens, get the referee to go and look at it, and let's make a good decision here, instead of absolutely ballsing everything up, showing it on the TV for literally like 3 seconds and then taking it away as if you're trying to hide something. Like, it really stinks of something going truly wrong. And I've got to say, Howard Webb, I know everyone thinks like, oh, you're a good face of the PGMOL, but you are doing an absolutely horrible job. And I wanted to give you the benefit of the doubt, but I think, the benefit is gone. I'm not giving you the benefit of nothing now.
Let me jump in, John.
You've arguably
Yeah,
made it worse.
no, I agree with you. On the Howard Webb one, real quick, he speaks well and he clearly knows his stuff, but he's having an all-time stinker in this role. And the more time that passes, it's more and more obvious that things are not. They're so muddied, it's unreal. And I'm really glad you brought up that Morgan Gibbs White one because it's a perfect equivalency. The referee thought something happened. The VAR and Anthony Taylor got involved. Whether you want to say it was right or not, they got involved and intervened because they believed it was a significant moment in the match, a la it might be a red or might not be a red. And like you said, those kind of situations, along with penalties, goals, something significant, VAR needs to get involved when there's been a mistake made, right? Or the decision has been made incorrectly. All right, throw-ins, corners, little rinky-dink rubbish that they were getting involved with and have been infuriating us with. Leave that. Please, God, leave that stuff alone. Let the referee just decide it. And if it goes the wrong way, people can all live with it, right? We don't want things to be re-refereed.
Yeah, and
But those
automate
big
the offsides.
decisions,
That also helps as well, right? Automate the offsides.
exactly.
That makes that quicker. Exactly. Yeah.
The offside stuff is something that would, we don't even need involvement because, like you said, we've got the technology and we've been shocking at trying to do it. Right? England has been absolutely stinky as recent as a couple of weeks ago with Crystal Palace and Mateta and that show. But this kind of decision, the Gibbs White's a great example. They got involved. Anthony Taylor got involved. As much as we hate him, he got involved, gave the red card. The managers went eight, but okay, whatever. They got involved because they believed it was a wrong decision. Why now, 1 week later, have you not got involved? Why? Why have you suddenly decided this is something we'll stick with the referee's decision? And you know what? I listened to the Gary Neville podcast afterwards, and it sounds like I'm going in on him, but he was driving me absolutely up the wall yesterday. He said that if the referee gave a yellow card, the VAR wouldn't have intervened. And the same way the referee gave a red card, the VAR didn't intervene. What are you talking about? So that basically means the referee can get it wrong and the VAR won't intervene. That's the whole purpose of VAR. I don't think that decision was a 50-50 between a yellow card and a red card. That was clearly a yellow card offence, not a red card offence. That's exactly the moment when the VAR is supposed to come in and say, Chris, you've ballsed it, mate. Go and look at the screen, or not even go look at the screen. Just lower that down to a yellow card. I don't think you've actually seen things correctly. And don't blame him or anything, because the referee can't see everything perfectly, but just say, that's what you should do, mate. And boom, you do it.
Yeah, and the referee can also
Why?
be gamed by players' reactions. He can be gamed by a lot of other things that lead him to make the wrong decision because he's being influenced by people on the pitch, whereas the VAR is not. He sat in a shed somewhere in Hertfordshire watching the game.
He sees all the angles.
Should be able to, and he sees all the angles. I agree with you, and I'm going to add one last thing onto that. Right, it almost seems as if the omission of a decision is when they get involved. And when he makes a decision, even if it's stinky and horrible, they almost now never overturn it, which is worrying me. It's like if he didn't give anything and it was a red card, they would have got involved and said, that's a red card, send him off. When he gives a red card and it's not a red card, he doesn't get involved to say, no, that's not a sending off, don't do that. It's almost as if they're biased towards giving cards, giving, offsides or making decisions. And if a decision is made, they won't overturn it. If no decision is made, then they'll get involved. And that's what really annoys me, because a lot of the decisions that are made are actually the problem, not the omission of the decision. In almost all cases where the referee misses something, it never turns out to be that bad, right? But when the referee makes a decision and it absolutely stinks, that's where he needs to be corrected. And I'm not seeing that happen, right? Like when he sent off Declan Rice, or when that whole situation happened, right? They are biased towards the red card. It's like, what's going on with this game if that's what we're getting to? But I think we've talked about that enough now. Let's try and get onto something else. And I want to just ask you a very simple question, right? It's not on the script or anything. We haven't discussed it, but I do want to just hear what you've got to say around it. Why did you lose? Like, what do you think it was the sending off really turned the game around? Or like, do you think you were going to get back into it? Just like, what was the breakdown in the performance? What were the tactical mistakes that you made that allowed Tottenham to just essentially run all over you? I mean, like for Van der Ven's first run for the first goal, he literally did run all over you. What was the breakdown, mate?
Yeah, I don't actually think the red card changed the game But I do think it meant that the game probably couldn't be changed. As in, we were poor before that red card, and Tottenham totally deserved to be winning the game. They could probably argue they deserved maybe to be 2-up, because I know Brennan Johnson hit the post, and I don't think they had massively big chances before that red card. To be fair, other than that, but they dominated the ball. They looked like they had a plan that was working, and they were the much better team before that sending off for sure. They definitely deserved to be up. So no credit taken away from them. I think Tottenham played an unbelievable game, to be honest, for the whole 90, and they totally deserved the win. But I do think the red card meant that it was highly unlikely we could turn the game around and get back into it, which unfortunately was going to be necessary because, like I said, we were abysmal in that first 38, 40 minutes or whatever it was before Bruno got sent off. And Ange's game plan worked. And it's absolutely baffling because, like I said last week, Tottenham, I think you said as well, they have a very distinct style. They don't really deviate from it too much. And there's been a blueprint out there, a la Newcastle, a la you guys, even when you went to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and a bunch of other teams that have shown how to get a result against Tottenham and how to exploit their style, their high line, and all that kind of stuff. And it just didn't seem like the plan was right, and the execution was most definitely not right by the players on the pitch. But it was really, I mean, the Van de Ven goal was a replay of really the Twente goal on Thursday or Wednesday or whenever that game was, where a player runs from deep, manages to bypass 3 or 4 players. For the Twente goal, it was a little bit more like janky because we won the ball back, but then lost it again. Whereas with this one, Van de Ven just breezes past 4 players and puts, to be honest, an unbelievable cross through to Brennan Johnson. And then I've got big issues with where the F Delo is because he's not marking his man. And I'm sorry, we had fullback questions, we had positional questions around Wan-Bissaka, right? Rightly so. When people used to say he's unbelievable defensively, he's unbelievable in a one-on-one duel. He wasn't unbelievable positionally and would often get caught out on the same way Delo got caught out because Brennan Johnson's just completely free. Delo's up, pushed up, and to be honest, it's a similar problem that we had against Liverpool. And Arne Slot came out and everyone was raving about him breaking down where our fullbacks are. It's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. Delo's pushed up 30 yards up, miles away from where Brennan Johnson is. I guess he's not expecting Van de Ven to breeze past 4 players. But positionally, man, you need to just be a little bit more cute and a little bit more reserved in the first 3 minutes of a game. You can't be that far away from your man.
Especially when you're not in possession of the ball.
Exactly. Or Martinez needs to come and cover you. So either way, whether it's Delo's responsibility or Martinez has the responsibility to cover his arse, it's completely, we've ballsed up the execution on that. And Van de Ven's done
He's got 60 yards. He's got 60 yards to cover. Delo has 60 yards to look at him and get his ass back, and he doesn't. And he puts his hand up before the goal goes in to say sorry.
Yeah, because he knows. He knows he's way out of position. He had, I mean, Delo, we'll get onto him in a bit, but he had an all-time stinker, and that kind of set the game off for how he was going to play for the rest of it. But yeah, Van de Ven.
Do you think that was the key? Do you think that was the key really to the loss? Was it the fullback performance, or were there any other parts of the team that were really lacking?
No. It was the whole tactical plan was wrong, and the execution was bad. So we should. And Gary Neville was saying it like it was a criticism at the beginning. He was like, "Why aren't Xerxes and Bruno pressing them high up? Why are we looking to play like an away team against Tottenham?" No, mate, that was right. That was the only part of the performance that was right. That's what's been proven to be right in other teams' performances against Spurs. Is you let them have the ball and then you break quick and counter on them. But to be honest, this is something you said during the game, and you were saying, Anne, what's something that was actually good at the back end of last season that you guys have maybe not been able to find in this game and against Liverpool, and that was compactness. Players need to be closer together, and that is the blueprint for Tottenham, to how to beat Tottenham. Is everyone is like your midfield and your defensive block are closer together, they're compact, and then the wingers and the attackers are ready to spring on the counter attack to exploit the space that is in behind on the high line. And to be honest, the strikers, Xerxes, and also I guess Bruno in this case, because he's the furthest forward 10, are doing the right thing with that pressing of the centre backs and how they were approaching it. The problem is the shape and the positional sense of our fullbacks, our defensive players, and our midfield block was all over the shop. Van der Ven's able to run through everyone. Ugarte should chop him, right? He's the first guy that should chop him. And then afterwards, it becomes really sticky because once he runs into the penalty area, you can't really chop him anymore. So, Van der Ven has got much more pace than De Ligt, than Mazraoui. Those guys are on a hook or a prayer to try and actually stop him because they're way slower than him. So really, Ugarte's got to chop him. Bruno's got to chop him. Someone's got to stop him early on in that run. If not, Dalot and Martinez need to be back in place because it can only be a cutback from there. What else can Van der Ven do? He can't do anything else once he gets into the penalty area. So it's an all-round stinker, and it just continued to the whole rest of the game. We were poor on the ball. We were poor off the ball. Shape was all over the place, and bar like 10 minutes after the second goal, it was an absolute all-time stinking performance. It was terrible. So the tactics were wrong from Ten Hag for the midfielder defensive blocks, and the execution from all the players pretty much was terrible. So I don't think the red card caused the defeat, but the only thing it meant was it was highly unlikely we could turn the tide. It just meant that it was pretty much going to continue down the same course it was already going, which was not good. It was really bad.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think I agree with you 100% that I think the defensive shape off the ball was probably the key to why I think you lost. And I think you're seeing it with a lot of teams now, but I think you're seeing it with Arsenal particularly. You're seeing it with City. You're seeing it with a lot of the what I would consider to be the better defensive teams is that their fullbacks do not play very wide. They can go high up, and they will, to be honest with you, they'll try to support, the right and the left wingers. But you'll notice that they don't stray too far away from their centre backs, and I think that's one of the great things that we're really good at is that compactness at the back. It doesn't matter if you go out wide. We are fine with that. We've got defensive players that can head the ball out over and over again. We don't care if you want to cross it in all day. But what we're not going to let you do is get anywhere near our box. Because when you get into the box, then it becomes about footwork. It becomes about other issues that's where an attacker is going to be better than a defender, right? But in the air, typically, you're not going to be better than me. So we're going to keep it really tight, really tucked in. And we're going to use our right and left winger to come back. So if there are big gaps in the wide spaces, I'll ask Martinelli or ask Saka to come back into that wide space where they're wider out or further out to the left and the right than the Timbers and the Calafiores. Do you see what I'm saying? And so I think with you, what you created essentially is that Dalot and even Mazraoui to a certain extent were too far away from your centre-backs, and they left this like passage in between the two of them, which is where Mickey van der Ven literally ran through, right? Like no one knew who to go to him. Mazraoui was stuck out on the right hand side trying to guard maybe Timo Werner, even though I don't know why you do that because he absolutely had an all-time stinker himself. And the same thing for Dalot, right? And I think that's a real big issue is that you're leaving too many gaps, too many spaces. And I think football has become more than anything a game of space. And so cutting down the space, getting really compact, which you were against Liverpool last season when I think you got the draw, against Man City last season in the FA Cup when you won. That was the way that you played that was really effective. And I think you've got to give Tottenham credit. They are a good attacking side, right? As much as everyone wants to joke about their plays and stuff, their defense is the thing that's shaky, and that's because of their defensive positioning. But generally speaking, going forward, they're pretty good, right? They've got, the Madisons of the world. They've even got now Solanke, who I think is a decent striker. It looks like Brennan Johnson's coming into form. They've got Kulusevski, who's arguably been their best player this season. And you've got to give them the respect of that. And I think by opening up all that space, you just played into their hands and really let them punish you. And obviously the silly mistakes of Dalot not tracking back, that one is not on Tottenham. Like that's just purely on Dalot. That was horrible defending. And you could tell, obviously, putting your hand up before the goal's even gone in, you fucked it up. So let's stick on that for a minute. I want to talk a little bit about player performances. Is there anybody that comes out of this game with any kind of respect, pride, or anything? Like, is there anyone that did okay that you're all right with?
So I've seen people chat about this and people giving some credit to Onana for keeping the score down because he made a couple of good reaction saves and he jumped up and he made a couple of good blocks, which I think is fair. I think there's question marks about the second goal, how quickly he comes off his line, or how slowly he does to allow Kulusevski to run in and dink it over him. I think that's fair, but at the same time, I think it's very harsh. What's become very obvious to see is we've got a goalie who's not who's not a strong shot stopper, who's being asked to make a lot of saves, and it just doesn't work, right? You either have to have a De Gea like character in his prime who makes a lot of saves and is able to make a lot of saves, but then not offer a lot when it comes to building out from the back, um, and play the way we're playing, or change the style so that he doesn't actually have to be that active and he can just be the first player building up from the back, kind of like City do, right? Or even like Raya does. But I would argue Raya probably has more work to do than Edison, right? And he's been doing it really well this season so far. Onana hasn't proved to be able to do that, so I don't even fully blame him anymore. I'm not going to go on Onana's neck like I have been in previous weeks, because it's very obvious now the system and the setup and the style of play is not something that is suited to his style of play, his personal goalkeeping style. So yeah, I thought he was semi decent. I think Rashford, Garnacho deserve a little bit of praise. I've seen some people hammering Rashford again, and it's very clearly now just an agenda, and people just don't like him. I think as a person, because I think he was one of the only attacking players that actually tracked back, was chasing down people in the defensive half, was actually really working and showing that he wanted it. Okay, going forward, his end product wasn't quite there, and he had quite a few opportunities in the first half to take on Porro, and he didn't get the best of him. But at the same time, I don't think you can put anything on him or Garnacho. I think Garnacho was a little bit more. Um, he was a little bit more kind of raw and off the pace. His touches were poor, but I think both our wingers wanted it and actually showed like they wanted to actually do something. They just didn't have the best of days, so I'm going to give them a bly as well. Everyone else deserves to get hammered. Everyone else. Maybe Xerxes doesn't because he got taken off at half time and he was semi decent for that first half. He had some nice touches and stuff like that, but everyone else deserves to get absolutely slapped up. Fullbacks, I think Mazraoui had one of his poorer games. I think Timo Werner, even though he was poor finishing, he rinsed him a bunch of times. He ran in behind him a lot of times, and Mazraoui got exposed quite a lot. But comparing him to Dalot, he still looked better. Dalot was absolutely all-time stinking. On the ball, off the ball, positionally, everything. He was shocking. He had an absolute stinker. I think the centre-backs didn't have their best day either. They got caught on the ball a bunch of times. But like I said during the game, they kind of didn't even have a chance to have a good game because of the way that our fullbacks were positionally, because of how that first goal went in, and then because of the red card, they were kind of like screwed, and they didn't have a chance to have a better game. But obviously, they didn't have a great game. Ugarte had a stinker. Kobe Mainu wasn't great before he got injured and got taken off. Casemiro came on, got absolutely rinsed for the second goal as well. So it just is what it is. They were all poor, minus maybe Onana, Rashford, and Garnacho, who maybe could have snuck a 5 out of 10 or a 4 out of 10 performance. The rest were all very low digits on that scale. So we were poor, bro. We were very poor.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I don't think there's anyone that comes out of that game with credit, but I agree with you that Garnacho and Rashford were, let's be honest, attacking wise, up until the sending off, you had a couple chances, right? Like I remember, I think the Rashford one, he was offside in the end, but I mean, that was a great ball from Onana. That's what you expect from Onana. That is what he's good at. You had the Garnacho like slip and smashes it off the post. I think on another day, if he keeps his foot in, that goes into the back of the net and it becomes a very different game to watch. So I think the two of them, they also did a really good job tracking back. I mean, they had a lot of work cut out for them, particularly Rashford on the left hand side because Dalot was having an all time stinker. But they both showed like that they were willing to do work on both sides of the ball, which has been questionable, especially on Rashford's side in previous games and previous seasons, right? Like people have said he doesn't want to do anything. He's kind of got that Cristiano Ronaldo kind of like sulkiness. If he loses the ball, he doesn't care about it. I think you can't say that about him yesterday. I think he was trying his absolute off to get back and to help out Dalot. I just think he was, I'll be honest with you, he probably defended better than Dalot did that whole game. They may as well have switched positions and let Rashford go left back because Dalot was, I don't even know what he was good at in that game yesterday. I'm going to hesitate to say nothing. But yeah, I can't disagree with that. But I want to quickly just touch on one point. So it looks like Kobe's gone off with a hamstring injury. It also, I didn't see this in the match. It also looks like Mount's injured as well now and came off in the 85th minute. How are you feeling about these two injuries? I mean, have you heard anything about the Mainu one? Do we know if it's serious or not, or how does that change the outlook of your team going forward?
Doesn't make any difference whatsoever. I don't even want to get into like personnel stuff now, because I know there's a lot of chat around. A lot of people blaming the manager purely, a lot of people blaming the players purely, trying to kind of
Mm,
like deflect from the overall problem. And
yeah,
I don't even want to get into the players' injuries. Obviously, Kobe's a loss because he's one of our first team players. Mount's not really a
yeah,
loss because he barely even plays, and he's been injured for most of the time that he's been at the club. So it just is
yeah.
what it is. I don't even want to get into the injury
Well,
situations because
all right. Well,
that gives Ten
let's get
Hag
into that.
a blight.
Well, let's get into that. We did see kind of a somewhat of a feud begin yesterday between old Goldfish, as Saeed calls him, and Saeed TV, with Goldbridge putting out a bunch of tweets basically saying, what was it? Vote for 5 players to leave with Ten Hag because nothing's going to change if you just get rid of the manager. These players are the problem. It's the same old people. Blah 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 blah. Saeed comes out and says, "What are you talking about? We've got mostly new players. We spent 615 million. You're giving the manager a bly again. You've got the same agency as him. Blah 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 blah." And it's kind of broken out into this, I think, pretty one-sided debate, I guess, about who is to really blame for yesterday's form and I guess the poor run of form in general. Is it the players or is it the manager? And I want to see, where do you stand on this, mate? Which side of the fence are you on?
I mean, it's such a it's such a simplistic argument, isn't it? Like, oh, who's to blame? Clearly, everything was rubbish yesterday.
Mm,
So both of them have some sort of leg to stand on. The only thing I will say is now, Ten Hag actually has no excuses. A lot of those players are new. A lot of those players are his. He's had enough time now. He's into his third year to be able to start implementing some sort of system that works. He doesn't have enough rope to keep having stinking performances like that, especially against our big top six rivals. There's just no excuse. So, yes, the players were rubbish. Yes, I've literally just said, apart from Rashford, Garnacho, and Onana, and those guys were probably on a 4 or 5 out of 10, the rest of the players were abysmal. So, obviously, the players are to blame. But I can't keep coming out here and saying all the time that all these other things are to blame and the manager doesn't have blame. The manager has a lot of blame. It's very obvious now that his tactics and his system are either flawed or they don't work with these players. And if they don't work with these players, he has no excuse because he's brought most of them in now. I'm not even going to get into this reduced argument about how much money he spent because that's by the by. He's not the one who's deciding the transfer fees, so that means nothing. But what does mean something is the number of players he's brought in, the style of those players, where they've come from, his experience and history with these players. They give him no leg to stand on. At least half the team are players that he's either played with, wanted, or he's literally had a career with the whole time. So he can't use any excuses. Clearly, the system's not working because the personnel has changed. There's no more McTominay's. Maguire wasn't in the lineup. De Gea's gone. There's no more Martial. There's all the scapegoats, Pogba's, all these guys that we've used in previous seasons are not there anymore. So we've got Onana, we've got Martinez, we've got Delict now, we've got Mazraoui, we've got Ugarte, you've got Xerxes. All of these players are people he's brought in. So all the scapegoats are gone. No excuses left. The only people who have been out for this game and the Liverpool game and stuff were Shaw, Malacia, right? Which I know is an important position because you've got someone who's not really a right left back playing left back. But Delo's more than competent enough. He's shown he's able to do a job there, right? He shouldn't be that bad as he was yesterday. But that's not an excuse anymore. Everyone else is either the people that he wanted to bring in or the youth that have been actually performing for him somewhat in his tenure. So he's got no excuse. So at the end of the day, I don't even want to get into this player or the manager thing. They're both to blame, but the consistent thing that's been failing has been our tactics, our style of play, which we do have, but it's just absolutely, let's just be honest. And then afterwards, the decisions that the manager makes. Even the substitutions were poor yesterday again. So
Mm.
I'm not even going to do this in or out thing. He has to go. He has to go. There's nothing left for him to hold on to. And for once I agree with the kind of the end evaluations from some of the pundits on TV yesterday. They're going backwards. We're going literally. We literally started off in a much better place than we are right now, and he's had more time, more players, and he's had more backing, and you
Mm.
can't defend it anymore. And I have to say, even Rude or someone else that comes in and takes the reins will do a better job until the end of the season than him. Then they either don't want to play for him, or they're not suited to his style, and he's not showing a tactical flexibility to play a way that works for these players. So either way, we're doomed if we continue with Ten Hag. And I would even say probably the season is written off, even if we get rid of him. I can't see a way for us to get someone in who's going to be able to turn around our fortunes quick enough for us to achieve anything this season. So, unfortunately, we're in this horrible position again where we're going to have to write off the season and just start looking at another project. And I think that's just a reality that all people need to face, whether you're Ten Hag in or Ten Hag out. This is where we are, and we're going to have to just start that process again now. And instead of
Yeah.
putting it off, hoping for another trophy or whatever, like I said yesterday to you off camera, we're not in a position where we need to get trophies. We're not on a long drought or something like that. We've had 2 trophies. We say thank you to Ten Hag for bringing us those 2 trophies, but we're not anywhere nearer. If not, we're actually gone. We've gone back to the starting point we were at when Ten Hag joined. When it comes to being close enough to the league title,
Yeah,
winning the
being a real
Champions League, or
challenger for
doing
the
something.
league
Yeah,
title. Yeah.
we are where we were with Ragnick here. When Ragnick left and when Ollie left, we're back where we are again. Some might argue even worse. So we've got our
Mm.
trophies in the bag. We don't need to worry about that now. We need to actually build a proper team again. And I don't mean buying players even. I just mean style of play that's going to
Yeah.
work, and actually performances on the pitch, and a consistent team that's going to, show us something that we're looking for from this team. And we're not anywhere near that. And I would say it's done. We just got to move on now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm not going to belabor this point too much. I think in general, it's time for him to go. I'm going to be honest with you. I think more of this comes down to the mental side and the morale of the players than it does anything else. I think when it comes to, I saw a quote from Enzo Maresca where I saw some shameless Chelsea fans basically trying to go in on Man United and compare their managers. And one of the big things they were talking about was the fact that Enzo basically came out and said, I want players to understand everything that I ask them to do. So if I ask them to run more, I want them to understand why they need to run more and what that does for the team. And my big thing about Ten Hag is it's pretty clear that he's not a very good communicator in general. I'm not going to bash him too much because obviously it's a second language for him and stuff like that. But generally speaking, I just don't think he's quite as good a communicator as he needs to be. I don't think there's multiple reasons why the play might be breaking down and why you guys might not be performing. Number one is they just don't believe in the manager and they're not trying very hard as a result. Number two is they don't understand what they need to actually do. Right. So if they're not understanding what they need to do, they're probably going to do a very poor job of fulfilling the tactics that he's asking for. So I think there's a combination of both of those things that are probably at play here, with obviously all of the history of certain players that have fallen out with the manager before, certain things that have happened in the media, and so on and so forth. And I think the way that everyone not papered over the cracks, but how the fan base kind of changed a little bit after he won that that second trophy. I don't think the players are fixed, are tricked by that, right? I think they're happy to get a trophy, but I think they also see like, I don't know where this is going. And I think more so than anything, the fact that you won those 2 trophies is a great example of why morale is important. Because I think when you go to a cup final, players don't need the manager to say anything. The players know, I want to do the absolute best and win a trophy here. And when you did that, you played well and you won and you got trophies. I think that is the best example of why Ten Hag is not doing a good job at Man United, because when it's the week in, week out stuff that isn't the final of a cup, there's no belief. There's no, Christian Eriksen's coming out and saying that, he thinks that other teams want it more than you. You see, like that week to week thing, you don't really, players aren't really playing for him. They're not really bothered. there's no big occasion to get up for. He's not inspiring them. He's not motivating them. But when it's the cup finals, everyone's up for it and you win. And I think that just goes to show Ten Hag has unfortunately lost the dressing room. I hate to say that, and I hate that whole phrase and saying, but Ten Hag's well and truly lost the dressing room. He's lost the faith of the fans, and I don't think there's any way back from that, right? You don't have a couple of kind of cup finals coming up. So I don't know how he's going to get himself out of that hole in the beginning of the season where there's nothing to really play for, and you've just got to have good performances week in, week out, and see the bigger picture. So, yeah, bring in Ruud. I think keep him as a caretaker manager. Don't put any pressure on him. Let him do his thing for the rest of the season. And Omar Barada, Jason Wilcox, and Dan Ashworth, get on the market, mate. Get in your wagons, fly around, see what you can see. Go and check with Amorim. Go and check with whoever you need to check with to get someone lined up for the end of the season. I'm not going to say that I think your season is completely written off. I do think, Ruud could come in like a Ollie type bounce and you could get better and you could end up doing, okay in the league. I'm saying like get into Europe of some kind. But the longer you keep Ten Hag, the less chance you have of doing anything like that, right? You're letting him ruin your season by keeping him in the job for longer and longer and longer. You need to get that man out ASAP. Let Ruud get in with his librarian look and get some fire into these players again. If there's anybody that can do that, it's an Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who's a Manchester United legend. I'd argue that Ruud van Nistelrooy is a bigger legend than Ole Gunnar Solskjaer in terms of what he's done for the club. So I'm going to say if there's anybody that can really motivate your players again to get up for the game and get up for the manager, it would be somebody like Ruud van Nistelrooy. So anyway, we'll move on now. Is there any last things you want to say about the game before we get onto the Arsenal Leicester game?
Nah, let's move on. I've had enough.
If by the way, if you're on the podcast just listening, Anthony's got a face like a slap right now. So get on YouTube if you want to see that. But let's get into the Arsenal game.
One of those the meme with like the guy's face where he's smiling, but behind it he's like absolutely dying inside. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah,
I'm trying to brave
exactly.